Hey, what do writers look like? Do they look like the local grocer? Do they look like the mailman? Do they look like the superintendent of schools? Superintendent of schools? Can the superintendent of schools possibly write a novel, and maybe with some steamy scenes? My name is Vin Dacquino. Our next guest is none other than Andy Rose, a former superintendent of schools. Andy Rose, let's talk writing.
Sounds good.
Hey, you were superintendent of schools, running a school system, and in the back of your mind was a little voice that said, someday I'm going to write a thriller novel. Yeah?
Somewhat, yes.
Andy, who are you? Give me a little bit of your background. Let's work our way to Lily's Payback.
Okay. My history is I grew up in Brooklyn in poverty. I became a New York City school teacher and worked in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the late 60s and 70s when it was very poor and very violent and very drug infested.
Wow.
I was very upset at the time because while there were some very dedicated teachers in the building, I felt there were a number who were afraid of the kids and who were prejudiced against them. Mm-hmm. I actually went to the principal. I was so motivated. I said, give me the worst kids in the school in one room. Cap it at 25. Class size was 35 at the time. Cap it at 25 and leave them with me for 2 years and don't add any more kids once we get started. But give me your worst kids. He laughed. He thought I was manna from heaven to make such a request, and he gladly gave me the kids.
Wow, he did it.
Yes. Now, with the kids, obviously, I had kids in 5th grade who couldn't read. Wow. They were non-readers, and they couldn't relate to academics in any form. So I had to use a lot of energy and humor to relate to them. But in terms of trying to actually help them, I struggled and I needed something. What I decided was that I would read great literature to them. I read Charlotte's Web, Laura Ingalls Wilder,
Great idea.
Watership Down, and the kids listened. They behaved. Now, there was one other factor that I had to address or they couldn't listen. These kids came to school hungry.
Wow.
Now, I did lunch duty, and I noticed at the end of the day, the lunch manager would throw out leftover food. And I said, why? She said, it's a health regulation. You cannot give used food to the children. I said,
sell it.
No, right, and cannot sell it. But I said, can you give it to me and I'll use it in my classroom?
Clever.
So I had vats, big vats of peanut butter, big vats of jelly, apples, bread, and a science teacher gave me an old fish tank which he drilled a hole in and put a spigot. It was a water cooler. All the kids had to do was raise their hands like this, quietly. I'd nod at them. They'd go make a sandwich. They'd eat an apple.
Feed them and they will come.
Well, actually, Bruno Bettelheim, in one of his books, wrote a chapter called Food, the Great Sympathizer, and he used food to relate to autistic children.
All of my workshops, whether they're classes, whether they're library workshops, all involve food. When I was teaching, I had a program called the Peanut Butter and Jelly Writing Academy. What a difference. Food has a way of bringing people together.
Yes.
No surprise.
Right.
Break bread together.
Yes.
And you are a community.
Yes.
You are a family.
Right. Now, my kids were receptive. I would read to them for an hour. And then obviously, as a teacher, that wasn't enough. I had to teach these kids to read.
Oh,
but again, I said to the principal, you're dumping these kids on me. They're the most violent, unmanageable kids. I don't want to use your textbooks. I'm going to use my own techniques.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if you remember, but that piano, funny pianist, Victor Borge.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Used to have a shtick where he did sounds and pantomime of punctuation. So I did that with the kids. Yes, exactly.
I remember.
And I used anything outrageous and playful. Plus, I had them write me a letter every day. I promised I would not show it to the parents. I would throw it away after we used it. They could say anything they wanted.
Wow.
And, well, it was like a diary. They really confided in me, things that were going on.
It's a great idea. We used to do it with journals and have them write in their journals. And I used to have to make a deal with the parents that if the child didn't want an entry read, they would not read it. And we used to let them staple those private entries. It's amazing. When kids write from within. We do this all the time with so many writers who are on this show. It's all about being able to write from within.
Within 2 years, the kids went from non-readers in grade 5 to average a year below grade level,
Wow,
which they were on the way. Now, the other thing, I used to go to the teacher's room, and I would see the ladies putting on their nail polish, wearing high heels. I said, gals, why are you dressing like this? How are you going to work with the kids? Okay. I didn't really get along with many of the women there. And one day I was so annoyed with them, I said, I'll make you a bet. We had a big auditorium and I was the assembly leader. You bring 13 of the worst classes in the school, put them in the auditorium and leave me alone with them.
Yeah.
Several hundred kids. I will entertain them for a full period. There'll be no fights and they'll stay in their seats.
Amazing.
Okay.
So what did you do with them?
Okay. What I did, I brought in grand opera, Verdi and Puccini. But I said, okay, imagine this. Now, many of the kids were religious. There's a bad police chief, and he wants to have sex with this woman. And he can't get it out of his mind. He's in a church. Behind him is a procession of priests. And he's singing, what am I going to do when I get my hands on this gorgeous woman? And that was the, in Tosca, the second act.
That got their attention, huh?
And they listened to it.
That is amazing. Amazing. You got to go where they are.
Yes, and
Amazing.
it worked. Now, after a few years, I felt that if I could get leadership in the school, I could make a contribution. I did not work the politics well in New York City. I couldn't figure it out, and I couldn't advance. So I did shift my career to New Jersey, where I got principalship in a small district. I loved being principal. And
what grade level was this?
Kindergarten, all the way. They should be able to get it, and it was through eighth
grade.
Eighth grade.
Wow. Okay.
So at one point, the a lawyer tells me that the head of the priest is leaving, and I was replaced. Now, I loved being principal because I worked with the kids, but for 2 years I was the acting superintendent, and I enjoyed it, and I was able to stay in it for 25 years.
Wow.
Now, in my writing, I went back to the Lower East Side of Manhattan where the kids were poor. That just had more intensity to me.
So you were a superintendent for like 25 years. Did you do any writing at all during those years?
No fiction.
No fiction at all?
No. As a public figure, I was constantly in the public's eye. I was worried about the behavior of teachers. I was investigating issues at home that were problems for the children. I made relationship with all the religious leaders in the community, the police chief, the mayor. So as a public figure, I was first very concerned that my behavior be pure and not criticized. And I had to deal with a lot of ugly stuff.
A lot of controversy, a lot of eyes on you as a superintendent of schools. So in the back of your mind, you thinking about, but someday I want to write a novel?
Well, I enjoyed reading John Grisham, Nelson DeMille, James Patterson, Dan Brown, but I didn't have time to deal with that while I was working.
So you are an avid reader.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, we need to know that readers are leaders, and reading leads to writing, and that's important. Writers are also fighters. They fight for what they believe in. They fight for what they think about. You had a whole lot of background. A lot of this background worked its way into Lily's Payback?
Yes. I wanted to portray teachers as heroes. I felt instead of James Bond, I would take Lily, whose twin brother is murdered,
Whoa.
and have her solicit the help of 3 teacher colleagues, and the 4 of them try to solve the crime. The problem is the local police have no clue who the killer is. He was hired by a very wealthy fellow and based on a real character from Russian history. I'd rather not identify his name,
Okay. But he's based on a real character.
Yes.
You know, I have an awful lot of talks with an awful lot of writers. And one of the things that's clear is that writers have a profile. Writers are different in the way they communicate. Some writers say, hey, all my settings are real. Me. I like to use real settings when I do the books. I go to the places. When I did Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye, I went to the city, and I went to the school where this fictional character would have gone. I walked the streets. I looked at the brownstones, sat on the steps of some of the brownstones. When I did the scene at the hospital, I even went to the emergency room and spent hours watching people go in and out so that I could create some real scenes in here. So my settings are real. My characters are not. Usually my characters are pretty much fictional. My story plots are almost completely fictional. How does it work with you? Now, your character is based on a real person, but the events in the book are not based on real?
Okay. The main character, Lily, is inspired, not based on, but is inspired by a former teacher.
Okay.
She was absolutely stunning to such a degree. She was 6'2", and on her resume, she had been in Egypt, she had been in Brazil, she had been all throughout Europe. And I said to her innocently, what made you travel so much? She grinned and said, I had a lover in each place. At that point, I ended the interview because I didn't want to get in trouble. This was a very good-looking lady.
Didn't go there.
I brought her to my female principal, and I said, Betty, you finish with her. Now, she was a great teacher, but she was very, very assertive and unique.
Okay, so you kind of thought about her as you created this character. Now, in the book, her twin brother
Yes.
is murdered.
Yes.
Now, it's more than just a drive-by murder.
Right. The theme that I struck was trying to find alternative energy sources. In the 1980s, 2 Americans claimed they had produced cold fusion, taking water and creating energy. Now, they faked it, and it could not be replicated. They were run out of the country. One of them has since died. However, the process is still being researched. So the story is in the early 1990s, 1993, 1992, and the brother of Lily is head of a research team trying to follow through on cold fusion.
And he's murdered.
He's murdered.
So Lily goes to teacher friends and says, you have to help me find out who killed my brother.
Well, In essence, yes, but it doesn't start that way.
Okay.
She basically has the gym teacher who has a crush on her, and he's very supportive. They go to the police, and the police are not able to make headway. The killer was a Russian assassin based on a real character who had an incredible history, but the source of funding was a corporate fellow who was trying to steal the research on cold fusion.
So they go about trying to solve this mystery. My guess is by the end of the book, they solve the mystery.
Yes.
And the teachers are instrumental in helping her to do this.
Yes, but to be realistic, although there's a picture of Lily on the front with a gun, and she is a black belt in judo and an Olympic swimmer, she would not be able to deal with the assassin. The Russian assassin was based on someone I researched online who was born during the Russian Revolution. At the end of the revolution, his mother was killed in a robbery, and he became an orphan at 5 years old. He grew up on the streets of Moscow post-revolution as an orphan. He learned immediately that at that age there were criminals who would easily take advantage of him, so he learned stealth. But as he got older, he became extremely powerful and eventually ran into a couple of KGB agents whom he didn't realize who they were, and he beats them up. Their colleagues come out, takes 36 men to arrest him. He's sent to a prison in Siberia where the prison warden is told by the KGB to teach him a lesson. He calls in a gang leader who sends 20 men to beat him up. He kills 18 out of the 20, and the gang leader tells the warden, "Back off, I'm hiring this kid." He becomes an assassin for various gangs, and the gang leaders in Russia, after he's released, repeatedly make the mistake of cheating him on payments. So he ends up killing different gang leaders, and the KGB is watching this laughing. After he's killed off several gang leaders, and this is a true story according to the internet, the KGB decides to take him out, that he's a loose cannon. They pursue him to Greece where they claim to have killed him but never produced a body. So the Russian people today believe he is still alive.
So while you're sitting there with the PTA and the Board of Ed, you're thinking about all these gangsters going through alleyways and driving.
Not exactly. While I was working, what happened, the sequence was while I was working to deal with some of the stress, because I was responsible for so many people and a public figure. And I saw public figures being disgraced, and I had 3 children of my own. I wanted to stay clean. I read thriller authors, but I wasn't really thinking of it. When I retired, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I went to the Hudson Valley Writers Center in Sleepy Hollow and studied there for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And I worked with an author, Mary Carroll Moore. She's published numerous books, and she helped me. She edited the book. She guided me to completion. Then I thought I was going to seek a traditional publisher with an agent, and I started. I was told it could take 3 to 5 years.
Or more.
Or more. My 3 adult children sat me down and said, "Dad, forget it. Publish, self-publish." I looked into that. They sat me down a second time and said, "Dad, the king of online sales is Amazon. Go with their subsidiary, Create Space," and I had a very positive experience with them.
And you're not the only one. There's so many people today who have gone to self-publishing because, we only live once. And as the years pass, we're losing opportunities. And sometimes, such as in your case, when a book is based in the 90s, we wait too long, and many of our things might get old. So you have to get it out there. And many people are finding that self-publishing is a wonderful alternative. So now let's talk a little bit about the when and where. When do you write? Where do you write? Do you have an office? Do you have a little space at the kitchen table? Do you go to the library?
Okay, I have a study and a wonderful setup there.
Man cave?
Yes, but I've ended up purchasing a laptop, and I stand at the counter in the kitchen because I don't want to sit for hours. So I have a stool, but most of the time
And
I'm
you
standing.
stand up and write?
Yes, most of the time I'm standing.
Good Lord. Wow, wow. And so you sit now, is there a set time? Like, is writing from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock?
Okay. With the first book, I was very disciplined because I had a class. She would give assignments. She would expect us to bring in material every week. With the sequel that I'm working on, it's more random, but I spend time thinking about it. And I had one vision, it's changed. I had thought of one ending, it's changed. And I wait for it to come to me, and then I go, and it comes out very fast.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to write Lily's Payback?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So that's a lot of writing and rewriting. What about your kids? Are they? Did they read this along the way?
Yes, they have.
Good.
Yes.
So were they editors of sorts? Make comments?
They gave me feedback.
Good.
Plus, I had 3 or 4 other people I involved as readers.
That's always good. I highly recommend that writers have a group of people that they go to. I have the writers' workshop over at the Mayapack Library, and it's amazing. People read portions of their book, and then they say, "Whoa, that's what you got out of that," And it's important to hear what other people have to say. So 2.5 years to get this thing going. Was there a point where you said, done? Or did you have to keep going back and back? Any parts bother you?
I rewrote it about 12 times.
There you go.
When I went to Create Space, I re-edited it another 6 times.
Wow.
So it took me almost another year to get it to production.
So now you did this on a laptop at the counter, put it all together, you print it all out. Did you print it out all those times, or did you show it on laptop?
Some of the edits I did on laptop, but some I printed out. When I published with Create Space, they didn't want the paperback copy.
No.
They wanted a file.
Yeah, that's right. And then you have to go through and you check it. And my guess is that you edited and pre-read this thing over and over again. Wow. Yeah, it takes a lot of time. It's not the writing, it's the rewriting. I say over and over again, writers don't write books. They work books. You got to work it and work it and work it till it happens. So then you finally reach your point where you said, done. Now it's done. It's on the shelves. People can read it if they want. And you teased me. You said there's another book. Tell me about this other book you're doing.
Okay. In the sequel, and interesting, I'm now in a writers group, not Writers Center, a writers group. I brought in the first chapter to the sequel. Being new to this business, I mistakenly thought in the first chapter of a sequel, you have to summarize the first book. No, they threw it out entirely.
Yeah.
Said start a separate book. During the story, you can bring back glimpses.
It must stand on its own.
In the second book, I'm focusing more on the school and more on the classroom, and I'm bringing in a principal who is a character, and he will be the focal point of treading on evil. And in the first chapter, there's an attempted mugging of Lily who escapes them, and that gang leader will come back later in the book as
So
a
Lily
killer.
is in the second book again.
Yes. And
Do
the
you
4
have a
teachers.
tentative name for this book?
Lily Unleashed.
Lily Unleashed. Sounds wild. So this is an adult book. This is not a kid's book.
No.
And this is Andy Rose breaking loose, writing the kinds of things that he wants to write.
Yes, and dealing with the kind of issues that I could never discuss when I was working.
Yeah, yeah. And I noticed you're not using a pseudonym. You're going with your real name. Because there's nothing in here that is wrong. Just maybe a little hot and steamy sometimes. Might be something that superintendent of schools would not want published while they were working. But then when you were done, you did what was in your heart. You did what you wanted to do. That is such a message for writers. That's what writing is. It's a chance to be somewhere, be something that you can't be otherwise. It's a chance to be who you are. And writing does that. I just love to sit at the computer sometimes and just let the book take over. Do you find that that's what happens with you? Does Lily write this book?
The characters do.
Yeah.
They really do. I spend a lot of time after a chapter taking a break and just letting my mind free associate and see what the characters tell me to do next.
Wow. Wow. So this book is out. It's available. It's filled with action. Wonderful read. You're working on the other one. How far are you into the other one?
I'm on chapter 6.
Chapter 6.
So I'm still just setting the beginning.
Right. So it'll be a little while before that gets itself together and comes out. We're looking maybe 6 months.
I think more like a year.
A year. And that'll be out. And we certainly will be looking for that. This is amazing to me. You know, while you're talking, I'm thinking of my superintendent. You know, I taught school for 35 years. I'm trying to think of my superintendent sitting home writing a thriller novel. He probably could. You know, sometimes we don't see that there's another side to other people. And there's issues that we really want to speak about.
And one thing I wanted to emphasize, schools are really being lambasted in the public, in the news media, holding teachers accountable. To me, teachers are heroes. You know, you can't make chicken salad if you don't have chicken. And yet the government and the public and the media expects teachers, regardless of how the children were parented, to make chicken salad. It is possible. I did it in Manhattan, Lower East Side, but not with every child. And it's very, very challenging. And to me, teachers are heroes, and they should be treated that way.
Well, today, Andy Rose, you are our hero.
Thank you.
I can't thank you enough. What a great show. I can't wait to get those cameras off so I can talk to you about some real nitty-gritty. Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's been a pleasure to have you here. It's been a pleasure to have Andy Rose here. Make sure you tune in. We have more authors coming your way. Remember, if there's something inside you have to say, say it.